Hi there, and welcome back to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Andrea Knits, and this is a little weekly Q&A where I try my best to answer some of your questions. Today I am wearing my Stria cardigan knit up in ampersand fibers. This was the sweater for not this year's, the last year's InstaFriends Knit Along that's hosted by Jess from Shop La Mercerie. And this was the cardigan I designed for it, and it is one of my favorites to throw on with this dress, which I made. This is the Wilder gown by Friday Pattern Co., I think is the name. But anyways, it's one of my favorite cozy winter dress outfits. We just got a boatload of snow here. Yesterday was one of those days where the whole world feels quiet because it's so, like, the snow is so heavy and fluffy and insulating, and it's just magical. So even, I mean, from before we woke up until after we went to bed, it was just snow, snow, snow. So last night I was out actually in the dark with my kids. They were shoveling while they were making snowmen, and it's just one of those magical evenings. And then this morning on my walk, it is blue skies, bright, beautiful, with all the fresh, clean snow that's just twinkling. So it's been pretty delightful. I hope you're enjoying whatever weather you have where you are. We're actually supposed to get some more snow over the weekend. So pretty excited about that. All right, let's jump into some questions. So question number one. Why in your DRK Everyday Socks did you decide to rib the sole of the foot? So the DRK Everyday Socks are ribbing all the way around. I have always been told to keep the sole in stockinette because it's sensitive. Love the pattern and its cushiness. So the reason that I wanted the whole foot to be in ribbing is because I wanted it to hug my instep. And I find that I get a better hug and fit when the whole sock is ribbing. And I also wanted that kind of hugging effect because that pattern has 11 sizes. So it is sized from basically baby up to large male feet. And I found that with keeping the whole foot in ribbing, I had really, really positive feedback from every single one of my testers that it fit great. And I think just having that capability to kind of shrink and expand helped with that. By all means, if your feet are sensitive to ribbing on the bottom of your sock, feel free to keep it in stockinette. I've never personally felt that. I find them to be very comfortable. I've never felt any stitch patterns under my feet. I suppose if you had cable twists or something that was adding bulk to the bottom of the sock, I can see how that would be uncomfortable. But to be honest, I don't find there to be anything that would cause an unpleasant sensory experience on the bottom of my foot with the ribbing for me personally. But that is what is so great about making our own clothing, from socks to sweaters to accessories, because we can adjust those things. So your gauge should be just fine if you decided to do the sole of the foot in plain stockinette. And if you have really sensitive feet, I would even consider doing the sole of the foot in reverse stockinette so that you had the nice flat knit side against your foot instead of the pearl bumps that we would usually feel on the inside of a sock. So there you go. That is why I made that decision. And it's always fun. There's so many decisions that go into designing patterns, and you don't really always get to talk about 95% of them probably, and there's all along the way. I mean, that's what's so fascinating about the whole process is you have a little idea, and every step of the way you have to decide, okay, what do I want to do at this point? And it's really interesting. I do tell my husband I have chronic decision fatigue because I have to make so many decisions all the time. But it's also really fun, and I think that is what makes so many patterns unique. And, designers are all coming from basically the same stitch. It's a knit stitch. looks like a pearl on the back and knit on the front, but we're just manipulating that one stitch to create all these different things. And I think that's what's so neat, is when you get to see how every individual designer puts their spin on things and the little decisions they make. And when we get to find somebody who makes decisions that feel really good for us as well, then that's always exciting. So, all right, next question. This is a really random question, but I can't help noticing you have many tattoos. I do. Are any of them inspired by knitting? Yes. I've always wanted to get a tattoo related to my love of fiber arts, but haven't found the right tattoo design yet. Just love seeing how people express themselves in different ways, and tattoos are one of those mediums. I don't know if I can get my sleeve up. Oh, I can. Okay, I wasn't sure how high I could get my sleeve. This is hard to show. There is the first one I ever got. So this arm I got tattooed in my early 20s. Before I got my sleeve done, I had just like a handful of tattoos, and then I went for it with my sleeve. And it was really fun because my tattoo artist was Annie Mess in Austin, Texas. She did a lot of my tattoos when I lived there, all of my tattoos when I lived there. And she was so fun to work with. I actually traded her a knitting lesson for a tattoo at one point. But it was so fun because she had some permanent markers, and I told her my ideas, and she sketched them on my arm as we chatted, and then she tattooed it. So we call it, it's like my doodle sleeve. It just has all these fun little things. It's actually representative of my family. So there's something on there for all of my siblings and my parents. But the knitting was obviously for me. And then I also have my heart on the back of my hand. I don't know if I can get that to focus. Get my face out of there. There she is. That's my heart on the back of my hand, which is knit and purl stitches done by Rachel Hauer, who also did my sheep. So this is a Cormo sheep. This is actually based on a photograph of a real Cormo that I just loved because she had this little sassy fluff of wool coming down over one eye. And then I don't think I can get my sleeve up high enough, but up here is a cardinal. Yeah, you're not gonna be able to see it today, but this summer I'm sure I can show it to you. It's a cardinal for my grandma Jenny, who taught me how to knit, and she passed away a few years ago, almost 5 years ago now, which I can't believe. But she is the reason that I do what I do. I don't think I would have ended up where I am today if she had not taken the time to teach me when I was around 9 years old. And whenever my mom sees a cardinal, she feels like it's my grandma. So I have my cardinal, and that cardinal is wearing a big knit scarf that kind of flows up over my shoulder. So it's a very special one. Also by Rachel Hauer. That was my first tattoo by Rachel, who is also a knitter, which is why she does such good knit stitches, because she gets it. She knows. But yeah, there you go. There are my current knitting tattoos. All right, next question. I've never used Surrey before, and I'm working on the big cozy cardi. I love it. Yay. I want to be wearing that right now. I'm gonna pull that out. That sounds delightful with all this snow. I'm wondering how I should block when finished. Do I need to do something different because of the difference in fibers? I'm terrified that the Surrey will bleed into the wool if I put the cardi in water to soak, but I'm also not sure how to go about steaming it either, or if that's okay to do with Surrey. Okay, so let's just start off with the first question here. I don't do anything different when blocking Surrey alpaca compared to a regular wool yarn, say. So for the big cozy cardi, for instance, which uses both a wool-based yarn and the Surrey alpaca collar, I didn't do anything special. I did soak the whole sweater, just like I always do. You can definitely hear me chatting about blocking my knits on multiple episodes, because I've talked about it quite a bit, but I didn't do anything special. Now, if you're worried about color bleeding, there's nothing to say that Surrey alpaca should bleed more or less than any other yarn. So just to throw that, if you were just worried in general that you thought maybe soy alpaca had a tendency to bleed, I've never heard that at least. So I don't think that should be an issue unless, say, maybe you're using red soy alpaca and you chose white for the body. And then I would highly recommend doing a little swatch and blocking it and checking to see if it's going to bleed. So if you're nervous about it, knit up a swatch with, you know, it doesn't even have to be that big of a swatch. If you're just checking to see for color bleeding, you can just do a little one, do a section with the yarn that you're using for the body of the sweater, and then a section of that alpaca, and go ahead and block it and see if you have any color bleeding. That would be my recommendation. I've also talked about color bleeding in quite a few episodes, but I would just block it how you always block your knits before trying to do something special, because it just might not even be an issue. If you do see color bleeding going on, then you might want to knit a few more little swatches and try some different things. Like in one bath, you could add vinegar. In another bath, you could put some color catchers. And worst comes to worst, you could try steaming. I just personally find that at one point or another, I wash my sweaters in a bath. I don't generally only ever steam them. So that's my only other thought on that. But definitely just do little samples. That's always kind of the best thing to default to. If you're not sure about something, do a little sample to try it out. Do a little swatch. All right. I liked this question. I like all your questions, but anyways. My question is about knitting sweater sleeves. Every time I knit sleeves, I end up having to swing the body of the sweater around since it gets twisted when knitting sleeves in the round. Either that or let my sleeves get twisted. Is there a better way to do this? This is complicated even more when knitting colorway in sleeves. Any suggestions on how to make sleeve knitting less annoying? So I feel sometimes that I am one of the few people who really doesn't mind knitting sleeves. Like, I always love it because I generally knit a lot of top-down sweaters. Even if I'm knitting bottom up, a lot of times I will still pick up the sleeves and then knit them down. And for me, I'm like, man, I am almost done once I get to the sleeves because they're smaller, they go faster. But I do know about Sleeve Island. I know a lot of y'all do not like being stuck there. So as far as that, I do agree. It can be, sorry, I'm on like a very old chair that my aunt actually embroidered the seat cushion. Usually this one is not the one I'm sitting on for this, but it's very creaky. So sorry about that. But I digress. So when you are knitting the sleeves at the end of a sweater, you're knitting them right onto the body. You're picking up stitches and then knitting them down. You do have this big old sweater body and it can be cumbersome. Absolutely. What I do, the first few rounds, I do find that I have to do like the rotating of the sweater. But once the sleeve is long enough, what I actually do is pretend this is my sleeve. Instead of continuously spinning my sleeve as I'm knitting around the round, I knit around the round and then I flip it back and then I knit around the round. And so instead of going like this, I'm going like this, if that makes sense. It's going to make more sense when you actually have your sleeve and you can try it out. But that way I'm not turning anything. So my yarn's not getting tangled up. It's not twisting around itself, especially when knitting color work. In general, that's my rule of thumb when I'm using more than one strand of yarn. When I'm using multiple colors, generally is when I'm doing that. And instead of just constantly turning my work as I go and letting those two strands of yarn spin around each other, coil around each other, I rotate it back to get back to my round so that nothing is twisting around itself. So that's what I do for my sweater sleeves as well, and I think that that works out really well. But you do have to get, you know, a couple inches down to where it's just a little more comfortable to do that. So I will admit my least favorite part of a sleeve is the first like 2 inches. I don't really love that. But the rest of the sleeve, I'm like, oh, this is so fast. But now I will share, ages ago on Instagram, Jen Geigley, who's another, I hope I'm saying her last name right. It's Geigley, I believe. So she did a little post where she actually took a cake stand, not the kind that you put your pretty decorated cake on, the kind you use to frost your cake, which I have because I was a baker. So not everyone's gonna have this tool at home, but I bet you could find them pretty inexpensive. And she just puts that on her lap and puts her sweater on there so that the whole base, it's on a cake stand. Cake stands spin, the ones that you actually frost the cake with so that you can get to all the different sides of the cake. So she just puts it on there. So check out her Instagram. I'm pretty sure it's just her name. I'm looking for my phone. I'm recording on my phone, but I was just looking at it, so looking for it so I could give you her definite name. But she does have a little Instagram reel showing how she used a cake stand to make that whole sleeve island thing easier. So that's something you could try as well. All right. Oh, this is another color correction question. I just finished my beautiful pink fizz in a cream DK, blocked it and ready to put it on for pictures, and I have a clear, very clear difference in the skeins that I could not see as I knit it together. I've had this happen. Can I soak it in tea water or something to correct this? Tea water is an interesting idea. So I have had this happen. I was knitting, actually my friend Annie Rowden has this really sweet little summer top. It's called Summer Mist, I think, or Spring Mist, one of the two. But it's really sweet. It's just like a little tee, but the back of it has the most interesting construction where you do this lace panel that is the upper back of the sweater. And then it's just a solid tee. And I ordered the yarn, didn't think to check dye lots because I ordered it all at once. And so typically when you order from a company, they're going to give you all the same dye lot. So it did not cross my mind to check. And I knit the whole sweater. And then I was like, you know, a lot of us knit in the evenings after work, after the kids are down, whatever it is, that's when we get to relax, and maybe the lighting's not always the best, but there are definitely times where you can't really see the difference until something is knit up and you get it into natural light and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a total like line of demarcation between these two skeins. Like you can totally see a difference in shade. So I've had that happen and I'm sorry, it is a bummer. I never did anything about it. I still wore the sweater. Because I liked the sweater besides the fact that it had those two different big panels of gray. But I think my first thought, because you can't really, I feel like your only option is to over dye it if you want to try and hide that. If it's very noticeable and really bothers you, that's what I would do, is over dye it. You could definitely try some natural dyes. I don't think it's as simple as just soaking it in tea, because you have to do things to prep the yarn. I'm gonna say right now, I am not a yarn dyer. I'm not a dyer of any kind. I have only attempted to dye yarn like once or twice back when I lived in New Zealand when I was about 20 years old. And I actually at the time did Kool-Aid, because that was one of the ways that you could dye yarn at home really easily, was you could use Kool-Aid. But they did not sell Kool-Aid where I lived in New Zealand. I don't think they sell it at all in New Zealand, but they definitely didn't have it where I lived. And so I actually asked my mom to send me a care package. I was like, can you include some Kool-Aid? Because I'm gonna try dyeing yarn. And you know, other side of the world. This is a long time ago. This is pre-Amazon, pre-fast shipping, you know. And so I wait a couple weeks and my package arrives and my mom didn't read the Kool-Aid packets she sent me. She just grabbed a few, you know, they're like 10 for $1, or at least they were back in the day. And I get them and it was like some special Kool-Aid flavor with invisible. The color was invisible. It was clear. So I think you even like guessed the flavor. I don't know. But anyways, it was just really funny because I wanted the Kool-Aid to dye my yarn and it had no dye. But anyways, that's the extent. I did end up dyeing some self-striping socks that I think I actually found. I used some other little powder dyes. They must have been acid dyes. I have no idea. I didn't do anything special. I don't remember using citric acid or anything like that. It's just I don't know. All I know is I was pretty proud of the self-striping aspect. That part was actually really fun to figure out. I liked that aspect of it. I don't think I have those socks anymore. They were pretty hideous, I'm going to be honest. They were not a great color combo. But I digress again. I do feel like in general you have to do special things to prep the yarn to take the color. So I could be wrong, but definitely do a little research. You could even maybe, can you use RIT dye on knits? I don't know. I'm going to stop offering up ideas before I tell you something that's not good. But definitely I would do some poking around online and just search some over dyeing techniques. And that is what I would do, is I would over dye that sweater to hide that, because after all that work you put into it, you deserve to have a beautiful sweater. So maybe try that. And maybe the tea would work. I would just make sure you don't have to use like a mordant or something to get the tea to stay in your sweater. All right, that is it. So in exciting news, this week on Wednesday kicked off the annual DRK March to May knit along, which is one of my absolute, I think it is the biggest knit along of the year. So we basically work from March 1st to May 31st, and there's both a shawl forum and a sweater forum. So you can do a shawl or a sweater. The only prerequisite is that it's my patterns, but you can use any of them. And you can even use whips. So let's say you have a half finished sweater or shawl that's a pattern of mine that you want to finish up with some camaraderie from some other knitters, then you are more than welcome to join with that. I will put the Ravelry forums in links down below. You can also participate on Instagram with the hashtag DRK March, the number 2 May, knit along, KAL. 23. It's a long one. I'll put that down below as well. But you can absolutely participate on Instagram as well. And I hope you'll join us. It's really fun. I think I started it at the very beginning of the pandemic. I think it was during lockdown. I had a giant sale and was like, let's just all knit together. And we've been doing it ever since. I wonder if there was one before that. I think that was it. I think that's when it began. And it did start, I think, with just sweaters. And then the following year, people were like, I want to do a shawl. So it's like, okay, we'll add in shawls. So it is sweaters and shawls. I usually try to do an accessory knit along afterwards in the summer when a lot of us want a smaller project. I realize it's not summer everywhere. So I'm going to say in my summer. So a lot of us like a smaller accessory project during that time. So there is a time for accessories, just not during this knit along, except for a shawl. Technically that's an accessory. An accessory? I'm going to end this one here because my words are just not coming out right. But I hope that you have a fantastic weekend. I hope you join us over in the knit along. Definitely come check it out. And I hope to see you back here next week. Have a great weekend. Bye.